Hello students, I am Hasina Bibi, Assistant Professor CSE Department, Rohini College of Engineering and Technology. In this video presentation, we are going to see one topic from the 5th unit of Problem Solving and Python Programming. And the topic is Exception Handling. Now let us see the objectives of studying this topic. So to understand the different types of exceptions in the program, and to apply the exception handling methods to the programs. Now let us see about what is meant by an exception. An exception is an event which occurs during the execution of the program that disturbs the normal flow of program's execution. Normally exceptions are simply, we can say, it is an error that can arrive during the execution by some mistakes in the program. Okay, so we can avoid the runtime error by handling the exception. In the Python there is the possibility of providing the exception handling mechanisms so that we can avoid the runtime error. Okay, so the exception handling can be performed with the help of some blocks or statements supported by the Python. There are 4 blocks are there. First one is try block, second one is except statement, third one is else block, last one is final block. So the try block is the block. Inside of that we will put the coding. The coding is that will have the possibility to create the exceptions or error. So the coding that may create the error have to be put inside the try block. So one can define their program from a runtime error by placing the codes inside the try block. Okay. Next one is except statement. Except statement should be followed by the try block. After the try block we should have the except statement. The except statement only will handle the exception. Okay. Also we can have multiple except statements to represent the multiple different types of exceptions and the corresponding handling mechanisms. So normally the structure of the except statement will be like this: except followed by exception. After the except keyword we have to mention the name of the exception. In Python we have classified different exceptions with the particular names. We will have the classifications. By referring that we have to mention the name of the exception in the except statement. Following that we have to put the coding to handle the exception. Okay, so each except statement is followed by the statements or the codings that will handle the particular exception. So in this example we are having 2 except statements and we are mentioning the 2 different types of exceptions, that is exception 1, exception 2. Under each except statement we are having the mechanism to be processed if particular exception arises. For example, if exception 1 arises, the corresponding mechanism, the corresponding statements will be executed to handle the exception 1. Otherwise, if exception 2 occurs, the statements following the except statement will be executed and it will handle the particular exception 2. Third one is else block. Else block means, here we can give the option, that is previously we will have the except statements, isn't it? If none of the previous exceptions arises, so if no exception, that is no mentioned exception arises, means the operation or the statement given in the else block will be executed. Okay, the program is creating some mistakes but that are not caused due to the exceptions we have mentioned in the except statement, then the else block will be executed. That is, the operation we are mentioned inside the else block will be executed. Then last one is finally block. The finally block is the last block which will, the statement present in the finally block will always execute whether an exception happens or not. Okay, if the mentioned exception happens or not, arise or not, the finally block will be executed. That is the, in both cases, the statements present in the finally block gets executed. So we are going to collectively see the example. We can see all the different statements. First of all, we have to mention the try block. Inside the try block, we should keep the codings, programming codings that may leads to exception. And after that, we have to list out the except statements. And the possible number of exceptions can be mentioned and the corresponding handling mechanisms can be mentioned with the help of except statement. So in this example, we are having 2 exceptions and the corresponding handling mechanisms, handling operations. And we are having the else block. If no such exception occurs, that is if exception 1 as well as exception 2 does not occurs, means the else block statement will be executed. At last we are having finally. Finally statements always will execute. Okay. Now we are going to see one example program with the exception handling. Assume in this program we are going to open one file. We are going to open one file, but there is the problem with the file. That is, the file name is test.txt. But there is the problem with the file. We cannot open the file inside our program since the file is actually not created in the computer. So in the program, when we try to open the file, it leads to error, isn't it? So we are going to do the program with the help of exception handling. Initially, we are having the try block. Inside the try block, we are opening the file. Since the exception is going to arrive while opening the file, so we have put this codings inside the try block. So we are opening the file in the W+ mode. After that, we are writing some content to the file test.txt. That is, we are writing the text string my first file into the file test.txt. We have written the coding for that. After that, we have applied one method, that is f.seek of 0. Seek method is used to change the file position. Here, the file position, after doing any operation, read or write operation, we can apply the seek method to move the file position, current file position to some places. Here, we have applied this method to move the file position to the starting of the file. After that, we have read the file. By applying the read method, and directly we are printing the output return value produced from the read method. For that, we have used the statement print f.readof. Next we are having the except statement, and we are mentioning one type of exception called as IO error. IO error is one kind of exception that may be caused by the mistakes of accessing the input-output files. This is commonly happens while accessing the input-output files or while performing the file open methods, while applying the file open methods. So we are mentioning this particular kind of exception in the except statement. And following that, we are having the print statement, that is file not found. So the meaning of this exception is, if IO error occurs in the coding present in the try block, the particular print statement will be executed. That is, in the display we will get file not found. Okay, if IO error exception occurs during the file processing, we will get file not found. We will get the string file not found. Else, in the else block also we are having the print statement. We will print file not found. That is, if we are getting the exception other than IO error. Okay, definitely we are having the problem with the opening of the file since the file is not present in the computer. Okay, not present in the computer. but we are trying to open the file and we are trying to read the write and read the file, and we have mentioned only one exception and the corresponding handling method IO error. The else block will do the operation if not the particular exception arises. So if IO error, exceptions may be of different types. So if IO error not occurs means the statement present in the else block will get executed. So again we are printing the statement file not found. And finally we are closing the file. Okay. In the finally statement we are printing one common statement, that is closing a file. Okay. And we are having many options with the exception handling, like the except class with no exception. So in some cases, if you are not knowing the exact exception name to be mentioned in the except statement, we don't want to mention the exception name. So it will be considered as a default exception statement and it will catch all the exceptions. Okay, if you are not mentioning any particular exception name in the except statement means all exceptions can be catched by the except statement. Okay, so in this category the except statement will be simply don't have the exception name. Okay, so here the advantage is, under the except statement we will give the operation or the exception handling mechanism which is common to all type of exceptions. Since we have not mentioned any particular type of exception name, so the underlying exception handling method or the operation will covers all kind of exception. It is common to all kind of exceptions. If any exception occurs, this particular process will solve the exception. Okay, then else block will have the statement, that is if no exception occurs means this else block statement will be executed. Finally, and we are having one more option, that is we can represent multiple exception names with a single except statement. We can list out multiple exceptions in the except statement. So all those exceptions can be handled with the common exception handling operations that is mentioned under the except statement. So the syntax will be like this. After try statement we are having only one except statement. The except statement having two type of exceptions, that is exception 1 and 2. Two types of exceptions are mentioned, listed out in the except statement, and followed by that we can have the operations or the statements to be deal with the particular exception. That is the handling methods are common to exception, both exception 1 and exception 2. If exception 1 arrives, the operation will do the handling, exception handling, or if otherwise exception 2 occurs, for the same operations will be performed for the handling of exception 2. So if no exception means else block statement will be executed and the finally statement will be executed in both cases, whether the exception arrives or not. So we are having an example for the multiple exceptions. So here again we are having the program to open the file and to read and write the string data to the file. Okay, and we are mentioning three types of exceptions in the except statement, that is IO error, value error, zero division error. The IO error is caused by the problem due to the while accessing the file. Okay, if the file cannot be opened from our program means, or if the file is not available, in such cases input output error exception will be raised. Value error means this is actually totally different from the file operation. That is, in any function, if you are passing the value which is not valid or the data type is wrong means the value error may occur. The zero division error is also associated with the arithmetic operations. When we are applying the 0 to the division operation, the 0 division error will occur. Okay. So for the example, we have listed out these 3 kinds of errors in the except statement, and we are having on common handling statement, that is print statement. Under the except, we are having only one print statement, that is simply we are printing file not found. Else, again, if the process is not performed, if the process we are mentioned in the try statement, try block have not processed due to any some other errors other than the exceptions we have mentioned in the except statement, the statement present in the else block will be executed. And finally we are closing the file, and in the finally statement we are having one simple statement closing a file. Argument of an exception. So in the except statement, normally we will put type of the exception, along with we can have one argument. Okay, argument is the value that give additional information to the problem. Okay, so in this way, in the syntax we can see except exception name comma argument. So in this way we can give the argument to the except statement. So the argument will do some operation, will provide some value to the exception handling operation. Okay. Raising an exception. You can raise exceptions in several ways by using the raise statement. Raise statement is another one option to raise the exception. Okay, to mention the exception, and the corresponding handling can be performed. For example, the raise statement will also have the argument along with the exception type. For example, we are having on small coding, we are having on function called as fun. The argument of the function is level, parameter of the function is level, and after that we have called the function 2 times. First time we have passed 5 as argument, second time we have passed 11 as argument, and inside the function we are checking the value of the level. If level less than 10, we are raising on exception, that is we are telling invalid level, and we are representing the corresponding level value. So when the function is called with the level value 5, this particular exception will be raised. That is, if the level is equal to 5 means in the condition checking, if level less than 10, the 5 is less than 10, so the invalid, so in the screen we will get invalid level 5. Okay, in the output we will get like this, invalid level 5. So like that we can raise the exceptions. Next we are going to see the different types of exceptions classified in our Python language. The exceptions may be of 2 types, built-in exception and user-defined exceptions. Built-in exceptions are, they are defined in our Python software. Okay, we can't change this particular built-in exceptions. The syntax for the built-in exception is, so we have already seen, we have to mention the name of the exception with the help of except statement. So these are all the various built-in exceptions present in the Python module. They are exception. First one, the exception is the base class for all the exceptions. All the different types of exceptions are coming under this base class. And there are arithmetic error. First exception type is arithmetic error. This will be arise due to the error in numerical calculations. 0 division error. This is raised when a number is divided by 0. IO error. We already seen that. IO error is input output error. When the input output operation fails while accessing the file or while performing the open function, this IO exception error, IO error will be raised. Type error means when the operation or the function is invalid for a specified data type, the type error will be occurred. Value error. when the built-in function having the data, and when we are giving the invalid values to the particular data type for the function, this value error will be raised. Runtime error. So the runtime error is commonly when our error does not falls to any of the defined category, commonly that errors are called as runtime error. That is, we are having some defined classes of errors. So if we are getting one error that will not fall into the given exception type, means that particular error will be defaultly called as runtime error. Then the keyboard error. So when we executing the program, if we press Ctrl+C, the execution will be interrupted, and this will raise the keyboard interrupt error. Then floating point error. This will be raised when doing the floating point calculation. When the floating point calculation fails, this leads to floating point error. Then some more exceptions are there: assertion error, overflow error, standard error, stop iteration, system exit, syntax error, indentation error, assertion error. So all those things corresponds to the different types of problems arise due to the various operations. Like when we exceed the maximum limit for the numeric types, overflow error will arrive. Okay. So the system exit is the exception raised by the sys.exit function. Sys is one of the module. Sys.exit function will cause the system exit exception. Then the syntax error is the error caused by the mistakes of program structure or program syntax. Then the indentation, when we fail to put the correct indentation in the Python statements, the indentation error will occur. Okay. Then user defined exception. So the user, we can create their own exceptions by deriving the classes from the standard exceptions. Okay. So there are two steps to create the user defined exception. Initially, we have to derive if we want to mention our own exceptions. But in Python there are many types of exceptions are there. Okay. Beyond to that, if we want to mention our own different type of exception, we can mention it, but we can derive our user defined exception from the standard built-in exception only. So we have to do two things. In the first step, we have to derive our exception from the standard built-in exception. In the second step, we can define our exception by referring the particular base class. Okay. So here is the example we are having to show the user defined exception. So here we have mentioned one exception named as network error. But we have to derive it from any one of the built-in exception. So we have derived our user defined exception network error from the built-in exception runtime error. So in this manner only we can create the user defined exception. And we are having one function. The function is to do some operations, and the data will be processed among the different nodes of the network. Okay. So if we are in the try block, we are mentioning the code that may cause the exception. Okay. So we are mentioning the exception. We are handling the exception with the help of raise statement inside the try block. Raise network error bad host name. So we are, if we are getting the wrong host name, it will be called as network error. We are mentioning this as network error. Okay. After that, with the help of except statement, we are having the handling statement. That is, if particular network error occurs, what have to be do is mentioned in the except statement. Again, in the except statement, we are mentioning the network error comma E. Network error is the type of exception. Here actually the type is created by the user, isn't it? Network error comma E is the argument we have passed to the handling operation. So following the except statement, we are having only one statement. Actually this is the exception handling statement, isn't it? So we have passed on argument E to the print statement. Okay, so print E dot args. So here some arguments will be retrieved from the content of the content we retrieved through the network nodes, and the arguments will be printed with the particular E value. Okay, so likewise in any particular system operations or the system applications, we can mention our own user defined exceptions. Now there is assertion operation will be there. So it is similar to the exception handling. Actually this is a sanity check which you can turn on or off when the program is in testing mode. Okay, so to do the assertion we can use one keyword, that is assert keyword. It will check whether the input is valid, and after the operation it will check for the valid output. Okay, so it will check the correctness of some statement. It will check the valid correctness of some input value as well as it will check the output value. For that we can use the assert keyword. So assert expression. So the expression will be checked by the assert keyword. So we are having the small coding example for that. So inside the function we are having on function add. Inside the function we are having the assert statement, assert x less than 0. So we will check the validity of the variable value x. We will check the values. Actually the value passed, the value x is the parameter of the function. The value will be passed during the function call. Okay, so here in the inside the function, the assert statement is used to check the value of the x, whether valid value is passed to the x or not. Okay, so after that only, by checking the validity, by checking the correctness of the value x only, after that only it is allowed to do the further operations with the x. Okay, now we can see the possible university questions from this topic. Describe the exception handling methods available in Python and state the various exceptions in Python. In the second question we have to list it out the different types of exceptions available in Python, and we have to represent when describe about the different types of exceptions, that is why particular exception arrives. For the first question we have to explain all the different blocks like try, except, finally, else, and we have to explain with the appropriate examples. So thank you all.